Synth Network.
Oh, there you go. Classic mess up from the start. There we go. There's my face, my beautiful face. Welcome, everyone. This is episode, what is this, 46, 47? I honestly don't remember. I'm that nervous today. Welcome to Pro Synth Network Live, the weekly show on a Friday where we talk all things kind of music tech and related subjects. And we have a very special show for you tonight. We are so excited. I thought I was calm and collected until I hit the go button, and it's just all like hit me. So if I mess up, I apologise in advance. But joining me as normal from California and the north of England, we have Cryss Synthient and Ben Simpson. But today we are so delighted to welcome the wonderful Michelle Moog Koussa from the Moogseum live in Asheville, North Carolina. Is that correct? Yes, got my geography right. Welcome, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good, and you're getting like 50 extra brownie points because you pronounced my name correctly.
Just I've been practicing all week. It's what having a slightly unpronounceable name myself. I always make a point of trying to do it correctly. So, tell me very quickly. We had somebody ask the other day, what is the origin of Koussa as a name? Is it Middle Eastern?
It's Lebanese.
Lebanese,
yes.
that's
Lebanese.
it. Yeah. Somebody said that it was Lebanese. Excellent.
It actually means zucchini in Arabic.
Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah,
I know.
I have no idea what Puricelli means. I know some people have invented descriptions for it, but we shan't broadcast those live on air. Michelle, you are currently sitting in, and we only found this out about 5 minutes ago. You're actually sitting in an exhibit at the Moogseum. Am I right?
Am. Yes, this is the Bob's Workbench exhibit, where we have a recreation of his workbench with a Moog modular off to the side.
Yep.
Until last week, we also had the Moog modular prototype here as well. Wow. So it's a really kind of special exhibit. It's right in the middle of the Moogseum, but it's near the end of the experience. Okay. And after people kind of learned about Bob, learned about his fascination with theremins, learned about electricity and sound, our timeline of synthesis is right across from me. After they kind of have absorbed all of that, we just wanted a space to kind of bring him into the room and show people the environment that he spent a lot of time in.
And where was Bob's workbench previously, before it was recreated here? Was that his home in Asheville or at the factory?
He has certainly had a workbench at the factory, and it's still there.
Okay.
But he often had home workbenches as well.
And this is a recreation of one of those, I guess, yeah?
It's actually the recreation of his workbench right around the time that Big Briar turned into Moog Music.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
Superb. Right, well, we're going to come back to you and ask a bunch of questions. Ben's on mute and he's waving his hands around. Let me just... I can't unmute you, mate.
Sorry.
There you go.
That was me.
Let's first go to Cryss, who is on the same continent, but right on the other side in California. Hi, Cryss, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I guess I'd be on the farthest, and Michelle would be pretty much in between us.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, very true. I have to say, I was going to try and do something similar, but I've just seen your switched on Bach at the back behind you there, of course, and you've got the Moog one next to you as well, so that's very appropriate. I have to hold my hands up and say, unfortunately, don't have any Moog gear in here, but everybody knows I'm all about the digital. Ben, how are you up in the north of England?
I'm very well, very excited and a little bit nervous on this special occasion.
Absolutely, yeah.
And listening to the intro music then, when the second part came in, it was quite appropriate tonight because that is a Moog bass line, which kind of influenced the entire track. So quite fitting to have that tonight.
Fantastic.
Yeah, what I was trying to say when I was muted before it is the exhibit where Michelle is. It's kind of like the ultimate before and after, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got like when it was all developed and everything, and then
the machine there,
the actual machine that changed so much in the background.
Indeed. Well, let's before we crack on with grilling Michelle for all we can while we've got her for these 2 hours. We are currently live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, which we introduced last week. So if you have to move off of one of those platforms, you can go and check us out over there as well. Hi to everyone that's in the chat room. We have loads of people in there. I'm not going to go through the names, but you know who you all are. Thanks for joining us, and if you have any questions that you'd like us to put to Michelle, then please do pop them into the chat. Make sure that you tag ProSynth Network so that we can monitor those, and then we're all going to try and sort of make notes of those, and we'll throw those at Michelle as we can during the show. Also, before we crack on, let's just remind you that if you want to make a donation to us to keep the channel up and running, then the link is just there. It's also in the description below. Talking of donations, you can also donate to the Bob Moog Foundation itself, and there is the link. We'll post that, of course, in the show notes afterwards. You can also visit the Bob Moog Foundation online store, bit.ly/shopbmf. And of course, you can find us over on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter, which are now all, thanks to Chris's hard work, showing the same name at ProSynth Network across the board. So wherever you are, you can find us at one of those locations. I think that's pretty much all of that stuff out of the way. So let's come on to this. So we kind of wanted to divide the show up into kind of 3 main sections to talk about the work that Michelle does, and the first of those is going to have to be the Bob Moog Foundation. So I'll go first. I'll ask a question. What inspired you to start the Bob Moog Foundation? What was that first spark of inspiration?
There was a very defining dynamic that led to the creation. I like to say that my dad was a really humble guy, and I don't think this is something he would have ever envisioned. So it's not something that was preordained before he passed away. But as you and your viewers may know, my dad had brain cancer and was diagnosed in April. And round about July, he really wanted to find a way to communicate how he was doing, which was not that great, with some of his closest friends. And my younger brother Matthew set up a link on the caringbridge.com, which is a website for critically and terminally ill people to easily communicate with their loved ones. You know, when you're ill, you don't always want to get phone calls, or in this case, you know, in our age, texts. And you don't want to, you know, may not have the energy to respond when other people have the energy to call. So this is a way to, they had a guest book where people could sign in and leave messages for people, and then there's a journal where the person who's ill or the people taking care of them could journal out and basically report how they're doing. So we my brother Matthew set up this page in July, and in the first 7 weeks, it got 60,000 hits.
Wow.
And keep in mind, this is 2005. People weren't quite as internet crazy as they are now, so that was quite a large number, and we were really astounded by not only the amount of people, but the breadth of where people were checking in from. People were checking in from 67 different countries. But I think the most powerful part for us was in the guest book section. You know, a lot of people, you know, on maybe other people's page would leave their well wishes, tell you about secret recipes that may help your ailment, you know, provide a prayer. But our guest book was filled with testimonials about how Bob Moog had changed and in some cases even transformed people's lives. And there were 4,000 testimonials there to this nature. Because of Bob, I'm a musician. Bob Moog gave me my creative voice. Because of Bob, I'm an engineer. People talked about, I stood in line and to wait and meet Bob. I was super nervous. I didn't know what to say. I got up to meet him and then finally kind of mumbled out my question. And he was so giving, and he whipped out a napkin and a pen from his pocket. He drew me a schematic, and I still have it on my wall, and it inspires me to this day. And it's just story after story after story like this. And from a personal perspective, I will tell you that is when I met Bob Moog. It was through those testimonials that I began to understand who my father, as Bob Moog, was to the worldwide community, because prior to that, he was much, much more just my dad, because he didn't really talk about his work that much. But after he passed away, we felt very strongly that a legacy that had inspired so many people all over the world not only deserved, but demanded to be carried forward.
Sure.
And it was then, right near the end of his life and upon his passing, that we decided to start the Bob Moog Foundation to carry that inspiration forward to future generations, to continue to inspire people.
Wow. I mean, I have to say every instance I've heard of people who have met your father have all said exactly the same, that they were, cotton-mouthed, stumbling over their words until he saw that, and then he was just the most gentle, accommodating person. And I never had the pleasure, but I always get that impression from people who've met him firsthand, and it sounds like such a remarkable man. You said that you really you didn't know your father as this pioneer until those moments. So how was home life for you growing up with Bob doing all of this great stuff? My father was always out at work. I never really got to see him. He was just in and out. And was that the same for you? Was he a family man? Did he spend did he divide his time equally? Was he obsessed with his job?
I would say he was very focused on his job, and he was gone a lot. I mean, one thing that was also kind of healing for me is, whether consciously or subconsciously, when your dad is gone a lot, I think you internalize that one way or another. But when I would read these testimonials about, I met Bob in London, and I met Bob in LA, and I met Bob in Paris, and I met Bob in Austria, and it just went on and on and on, and I thought, oh, you know what? This was the reason, this was the reason, because he was out there inspiring people.
Yeah, ever so much.
Yeah, so he was gone a lot, but when he was home, and not working, because he did have a home shop in almost every house that we lived in. Mm-hmm. And his routine would be, he'd work all day, come in for dinner, and then take a little nap, and then go back out and work until 11 o'clock or midnight.
Yeah.
And the one time that I would really count on getting time alone with him is you'd have to go down to his workbench to give him a kiss goodnight.
Yeah.
And I think if anything gave me a little perspective on what his work was, it was that, because I would go down there and, tiptoe down in my pajamas or run across the driveway into his workshop, and there would be all these weird sounds. And I would stand there at the threshold of the door before I went in, just thinking, what is he doing?
Did you understand when you? It was not. It was just.
I really didn't. I mean, I maybe in the most surface-oriented way I did.
Sure.
And, but I will say that when he was not working, he was the kind of person who was just fully present. Right. So, the time that he did spend with the family, and he really did enjoy spending time with the family. We always had meals together. There was always conversation. We weren't a family who had like maybe a TV going in the background or anything like that. It was very focused, and there were family vacations, and there were often outings. They were often nature based because Dad was a huge nature lover, and he was always there and at our level, no matter what age we were, when we had that time with him. He also loved to garden. That's one thing we all did together too. Yeah, and as we got older and older, we would bake and cook with him on occasion too, which was really fun because he liked to say that cooking and baking are just synthesis of another sort, and he really enjoyed both of those.
He's got a point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but for the most part, he didn't talk about work. And I was born in 1968. Same year that Swiss Jean Bach came out. So by the time I was old enough to kind of understand a little bit of what was going on, he had left the company maybe 10 years later. I have sisters who are 5 years and 7 years older than I am, and their experiences are quite different. They were old enough to go to ELP shows.
Right.
But, my first real exposure, aside from knowing my dad invented the Moog synthesizer, which is all I really knew, and that it was somehow a big deal because every once in a while when we were out in public, something would happen and I would know it was a big deal, was in 1973 when he was on the To Tell the Truth game show.
Yes, that
we've
was
seen
great.
the clip. Yeah.
And, we were not allowed to watch very much TV as children, but my mom sat us down for that. And I can just remember having this kind of out-of-body experience, like, why is Dad on TV?
Awesome.
So
That's funny. That's good.
It has been a journey. It's been a journey getting to know Bob Moog, right up until the present.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess sorry, Cryss, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that needs to be said too that I'm very appreciative of is that when we have these people that mean so much to us, whether it be a musician or an inventor or anybody, especially after they pass, like there's such a love for these people that we want to know. We want to dig in and to find out who they were, and to if we don't really have that right. It's their personal and private life. And so to hear stories about him, to hear what you're sharing about your family and your father, I always take pause at that because it is something like you're allowing us to come and know a little bit of the person that you knew, not just the inventor, but, who he was in his regular life. And just to say how appreciative we are of that, because it's not something that we deserve or a right that we have, but we just so much get joy out of knowing a little more about a person that's inspired our music. So,
well, I'm so glad, and it's a both a pleasure and an honor for me to have that role where I can help share that and communicate it. And I do feel very strongly in being able to relate Bob Moog as a nuanced, complex human being who had a variety of life experiences like all of us, both ups and downs, so that people have a better understanding not only of him, but maybe perhaps even of the story of invention. I think people tend to glorify what the story of invention feels like, and they equate it with fame and fortune, and the other complexities get a little lost. It's something we try to bring alive here in the Moogseum through our Bob Moog timeline, which starts off with his birth and right up through 2005. Just kind of weaving his personal life and his work life together. So I think it's really important. It's important for people to understand what the reality of these kind of people is too, in addition to just understanding a little bit more about them. Because I think some people, if you aspire to be an inventor like Bob Moog, it's not, the kind of experience, you shouldn't expect that you're going to sit at your workbench in your nice white lab coat and the mini Moog is going to drop down from synthesizer heaven and you're going to get rich and famous. It's and sometimes it feels like that. It feels like a very kind of glossed over presentation is made of how these things happen. So I like to add a dose of the beautiful reality that is behind all of that.
And it's funny because I've speaking to you now, I've spoken to other inventors or developers of similar things, and like you say, there's this kind of air of, well, they invented this, so they must be rich and wealthy and have a very nice lifestyle, and it's really the exact opposite a lot of the time. It's so much hard work, so much sacrifice and blood, sweat and tears, you know, and very little financial success, certainly of the amount that, you know, some would have us believe.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And I would say, especially with Bob Moog,
Yeah.
you know, I would say his career was much like a sine wave, you know, the ups and downs, and there was near bankruptcy, and you know, there were times that he was a little bit more flush, but you know, as flush as he ever got was what I would call maybe comfortable.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of financial angst.
Yeah.
In our house, amongst our parents for a very long time, and you know, I think part of the reason that they even were able to maintain the lifestyle they had at times was because they had very loving older relatives who were very generous with them.
Oh,
so that's, you know, one day I will write a book from the family perspective.
Please do.
Yeah, just because, and I'm sure we're not the only family, so it's not just, you know, oh, you know, this only happened to our family. I do believe it's part of the story of invention, that these inventors are these brilliant, driven, hyper-focused, obsessed people, but they do have a microcosm of support, different kinds of support around them that allow them to do their work and help lift them to do their work.
And also because they are these remarkable inventors who create the first of something or the best of something, that's their focus, and they don't have the necessarily the business acumen, the wherewithal, and you know, the experience to then take that to market, to get it, make it successful, so they can actually put food on the table through their hard work and invention. And you know, I've seen that personally with Peter Vogel from Fairlight, who did exactly the same thing, came up with a groundbreaking concept, which I believe Bob was a huge fan of, but never, you know, the business went bankrupt in 10 years because they just really didn't know how to run a business. And even to this day, you know, legal wranglings and money problems, it just seems to be part of that blueprint, doesn't it?
It does, and I think it's also highly understandable, because I think it's extremely rare that you have a person who's highly creative and scientific. Then
they don't go together, do they?
Then to also be business minded.
Yeah.
Those seem like two different parts of the brain, and you know, the thing that I've observed in being connected to my father's legacy in the way that I am, and having the great fortune of being connected to so many super bright people, and the brightest among them is they are incredibly intelligent in some ways, and then I noticed there is they are less strong.
Yes.
In other important ways that they need to function in life.
Yes.
So I think, you know, it's like the brain has a certain sense of balance.
Yeah.
So if you have a propensity somewhere, you often have another area that's not quite as strong.
Sure. Before sorry, go ahead. You were going to say.
I was just going to say I think that was my father's case as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I ask you the next question about the BMF and its work and what you do with, you know, the organisation, Cryss, Ben, you've been hopefully monitoring the chat. Have you got anything you want to just put to Michelle before we move on to the next bit?
There's a couple of questions come up in the chat so far. I was just one of the interesting ones I spotted was. I'm curious. It's from Synth Addict, and he says, "I'm curious. What was Bob's favourite invention, / device, component, synth, modern theremin? What did he give any kind of indicators as to what he was most proud of, his finest achievement, as it were?"
Well, he never talked to me about that.
Right.
But he did actually talk to my former stepmother He remarried fairly late in his life and was married for the last 11 years of his life to Ileana Grams. As she shared with me that he felt, and this is going to probably come as a surprise to many of you, that his work with a multi-touch sensitive keyboard was his greatest contribution.
Wow.
And the fact is that work, that early work that started in 1970 when he began developing that keyboard with avant-garde composer John Eaton, that work was the predecessor to things like the Rolly keyboard, the Hawken Continuum.
Yeah.
You know, if not in a direct technical way, but then in an indirect technical way.
Is that the same? Now you have to forgive my ignorance here. Is that the same sort of keyboard that was used or mimicked in the what's it called, Animoog iOS app, which was a kind of a Moog synthesizer where you could slide your fingers up and down to affect various things in the. Was that the same sort of thing or?
I think so. I am. I am not a technical person, so I can't speak. You know, I wish Amos Gaines was here right now because he would explain it so incredibly well.
That's okay. Yeah. I was just wondering if that was the same thing.
It is, and it's, you know, the multi-touch sensitive keyboard was touch sensitive in 5 different ways, and I do think that. And actually, here's a really interesting story. Amos told me that, so Amos is an engineer at Moog Music, really incredibly bright, also very kind, astoundingly articulate guy, who's been very important to the development of what Moog Music has become since my father's passing. And he, when my father was ill, and it became obvious, kind of a sad moment, he kind of cleared off a lot of his workbench. He came to the office and he had a cane. He was walking with a cane at that point. And he couldn't carry things on his own. So Amos helped him out to the car. And Amos shared with me later that he said, you know, your dad turned to me and said, Amos, the keyboard is an antiquated interface. It's time to move on.
Wow.
And I think Amos has carried that with him in a very serious way. And part of the result of that can be seen in the Animoog.
Right. See, that's the connection. Yeah. Cryss,
Well,
do you have anything?
Yeah, it's such a shame that he passed when he did. I mean, first of all, just as a person and for everybody that loved him, but also in the sense that the way that technology was opening up. And I've heard you mention in other interviews that was a really big passion of his, to work on new types of input into a synthesizer and how you control it. So I just have found that very fascinating, and it would have been very interesting to see where he would have gone with that. And you know, Amos Gaines is great. We would love to have him on the show. We've already been asked in the chat. Obviously, I'm a big fan of his. So let me just pick up another one of the chat questions, because we're getting a lot of great chat questions.
Yeah, there's some good questions coming in.
So let's see here.
Go easy, you guys.
Yeah. We won't grill you on technical stuff here. Oops,
I was going to say, if they ask me to do like a filter comparison, we're going to have a problem.
So Brian just Gethsemane Music in the chat. He says, what was life like at home with Bob? Did he bring the work home? Was it a musical home? And I've heard also that you've talked about he was trained as a classic pianist. So was that ever a part of your home growing up?
So, so life at home was, a lot of the times it was just with my mom. As mentioned, Dad was gone a lot. He worked a lot. He traveled a lot, all of that for work. So home life was mom and the 4 kids. My mom was a huge appreciator of music. She was not a musician, but she played classical music all the time. So I would say that's where most of the music in our household came from, was from my mom playing music. oftentimes to keep herself company when her spouse wasn't around. So we certainly were, exposed a lot through that. And she had her favorites too. She adored Wendy Carlos, and he played Switched on Bach regularly along with Wendy's other albums. But also played ELP and Tomita. She was a big fan of Tomita's.
Wow.
As far as Dad went, he hardly ever played the piano. He was very, very proficient at it at one point. He attended the Manhattan School of Music. He played the piano for 14 years. He played semi-professionally. He as a dance pianist.
Like accompanist.
Yeah. Well, not an accompanist, but he worked one summer at a hotel where they had, this is in the Catskills in the 50s, where they had dances every night for people, waltzes and foxtrots, and so he would play the piano for that. He was also in a couple of bands in college. So he loved to play, and he was very good at it. And at the Manhattan School of Music, they did say, you are proficient enough to become a professional pianist, and we would like to offer you that training. But at that point, he turned them down and said he'd rather build electronics with his father in the basement instead.
And thankfully he did.
At which point, my grandmother's dreams for him to become the next Liberace came crashing down. But he did not play very often at home. We did have a beautiful piano at home, and two of us took piano lessons for a very limited time. He would sit down every once in a while. There was always a piano bench full of his music, and he would sit down every once in a while. But I think he would get a little frustrated because, as any good musician or pianist knows, you have to practice.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to practice the piano when you're working 16 hours a day and traveling.
Absolutely.
So he would sit down and he would play, and I always thought it sounded great, but I'd always hear him say, futz. Futz. You lose the muscle memory, you lose So I know he always enjoyed it, but he did not play that often, just because I don't think he had the time and the focus. His time and focus were elsewhere.
Sure.
But 3 out of 4 of the Moog kids did pick up musical pursuits. My eldest sister Laura became a very proficient Baroque recorder. She played the recorder, so I guess that would be recorder player. Yeah, she was very, very good at it. My sister Renee played the oboe and the flute, and I played the violin for 6 years and was in the junior orchestra here in Asheville, North Carolina.
Cool.
So
Excellent.
there was certainly an appreciation.
Yeah. So we've spoken about what kicked off the BMF and about your father in particular. I want to kind of look at what the work that the BMF does and what you do there. So I'm just going to bring up the website so that we can all kind of see what goes on there, and let's just share that. So it looks like and correct me if I'm wrong, there are 3 kind of main elements to the BMF. You've got the Moogseum, where you are at the moment. You've got the archive, and the storage of Bob's documents and equipment and so on. And then you've got Dr. Bob's Sound School. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about each and what they do and how they affect the community?
Yeah, of course. So, we talked about how powerful Bob's legacy was and how it inspired so many people, enough to inspire us to create the foundation. But we really had to do some thinking about, what do we want to do with this legacy? What would be the most powerful way to share this legacy and inspire as many people as possible? And it did take us a little time to kind of figure that out. It's a large consideration. But what we finally came to is that we wanted to inspire little kids. We wanted to start there. And that's where the idea for Dr. Bob's Sound School came from. To be able to bring experiential sound activities into the schools, to be able to encourage kids to create and to engage in the process of discovery. What we're really trying to do through Dr. Bob Sound School, which is a 10-week experiential curriculum that teaches little kids about the science of sound through music and technology, is not only to get them connected to sound, which is such a cool medium that they are connected to every day but may not understand, but also to get them connected to science, because yes, thank you, science is a real thing that should be respected.
Indeed, absolutely.
But also to encourage them to be more creative thinkers, because God knows we need more of that in this world, and the problems of this world are not going to get any simpler. They're going to get more complex, and we really wanted to help engage kids in critical thinking. So we started out just kind of going into schools and doing these short kind of fun activities where we'd bring in theremins and synthesizers, hook the theremins up to Moog and let kids play and give them a short lesson. This would all happen in 1 hour's time slots. But it was so successful that we eventually developed the 10-week curriculum. We started with 8 classrooms where we piloted the program 8 years ago, and we are now in over 130 classrooms in Asheville, North Carolina. We serve 3,000 children every year. We've served just short of 20,000 children through Dr. Bob Sound School. And what Dr. Bob Sound School does is it teaches kids how sound is made, how it travels, and how it's heard. So the full cycle. And we use all kinds of different techniques, educational techniques, to teach them the material. And this is at the 2nd grade level, so that's 7 years old here in the United States. So they're quite young. People are under the impression that, we bring in a subsequent 37 and put it in front of them. That's a little advanced for 7-year-olds and for 2nd grade teachers, who most of whom are not synthesists, it turns out. But what we really wanted to do was help kids build up an understanding of sound, so that when they did get in front of a synthesizer, which doesn't have to be a sub 37 or a Moog 1, it can be something like the Animoog that's on their phone, or the Mini Moog that's on their phone, or any other wonderful software emulation that they have access to because they have a phone, because they have an iPad, because they're one of their parents has an iPad with one of these apps on it. We wanted them to understand what was going on. They have so much access to synthesis at this point. We wanted to bring them back to the foundations so that they really understood. And it has been very, very powerful in that respect. So we have got a bunch of little kids who understand the power of vibrations, how sound, travels to their ear, how their ear works, how to read a waveform. We bring theremins into the schools, have the teachers hook them up to oscilloscopes, and have teach the kids about pitch and volume through the theremin and the oscilloscope. And of course the theremin provides this incredibly powerful, engaging, educational interface, as well as a beautiful musical interface as well.
Because your father had a real passion for theremins, because that was his first real kind of exposure to electronic synthesis, I guess. Am I correct?
Yes, you could say that. He discovered theremins very early on, at age 14 or 15. My grandfather was an electrical engineer and had a beautiful workshop in their basement. And he would bring my dad down there, and I think my dad actually was escaping having to practice the piano, escaping the ever watchful eye of his very strong-minded mother. Sure. And so he and Grandpa would escape down to the basement, and they started off with smaller electronic hobby projects, like 3-note organs and things like that. But eventually, Dad stumbled upon the theremin design and began designing theremins at 14, designed his first theremin at 15, and shared it at a science fair at Bronx High School of Science. And by 19, he was in business selling theremins. He was deeply, deeply inspired by Leon Theremin, who he regarded as his virtual mentor. He studied and studied his circuitry, and he really regarded Leon Theremin as a demigod.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the outreach that you do with the kids, this is exclusively in the Asheville area. Do you go further afield in the United States?
Not yet. And
Okay.
I am happy. I am happy to say that, one of the issues is that while we provide theremins to every school in the Asheville area, it's not a feasible model to scale the program. So we've been working for many years to create our own educational tool that will kind of translate our work with the theremin into something that is easier for teachers to set up, that it's more robust, and is made to be played by 25 kids every day,
Sure.
which the theremin is not. So we are at the very tail end of making that happen after many years of working on it.
Cool.
And once we're able to do that, we will be scaling the program nationwide.
Okay.
And we've been working very hard to build up the resources, both human and financial, to be able to do that. And we are getting to the point where we will be able to begin to make that happen. And we're hoping actually that we can start to make that happen in the latter part of this year. Of course, things are still a little iffy with the pandemic, so we're not sure yet. But one of the things that we have been doing with the pandemic is with each of our programs, we've tried to pivot and bring our programs to people in a virtual way. And we have developed a virtual version of Dr. Bob Sound School, and we did our first teacher training a few weeks ago for about 30 teachers here in the Asheville area, so they can. It's hard to take a highly experiential curriculum and turn it into something virtual, but we were able to do it, and that step is going to allow us to also grow the curriculum and the program throughout the country and hopefully outside the boundaries of the United States much more easily in the next, say, 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question. Do you have international ambitions?
Well, we do, in that, first and foremost, they would be online. That's the most feasible way to begin with. But eventually, we would love to have Dr. Bob Sound School in schools across, all over the world.
Yeah.
And we have designed it in a way where that should be possible.
Yeah.
So we're really looking forward to the next stage of the Bob Moog Foundation, where we can really spread our wings in a much more international fashion.
Sounds
This
amazing.
is something that's tremendously important. I was talking to my wife about this. So my wife's a teacher, and her position right now, she's been in the classroom for many years, and now she's works for the district, teaching other teachers how to teach, that kind of thing. And she says teachers are the worst students.
Yep.
And so one of her frustrations has been, like, when you have something that's important to understand, and my wife's own style was, trying to help them understand the concept of why these things were important rather than just rote figures and facts, because then you suck all the life out of the topic that you're teaching. And so she was particularly impressed with this, as am I, in that you're bringing something that's like physics and science, the physics of sound, that too often is just taught in a way that why do I care about this? Why would I want to know about this? But to make it so experiential for the kids to do this, we're really missing that. At least here in the States, we're really missing that aspect. And so I think it's a very exciting thing that this is happening, and I'm so impressed about how many classrooms this has been going on in Asheville, and looking forward to it going across the country, as you've been talking about that. That is so amazing. Here, science can be fun. Yeah, of course, we all know it, but we're not seeing enough of it like this is.
Yeah. I think the theremin's a perfect device as well, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it's that to use for that.
It is just waving your hands around and sound happens, and wow,
yeah.
it's cool.
And then incorporating a software so that people can use it on the phones or tablets that they already have, and then there's so many jumping off points.
Yes.
But I don't think kids are going to go and pick up a synth app themselves. They need to be introduced to sound and how it works and how fun it is by seeing it in action, and that's the perfect way to do it.
I wonder if you could make a theremin between like an iPhone and an iPad at the same time, so you're using both hands like that to communicate together.
There you go, Ben. Your project for this week.
I've got too much going on.
That's your homework.
Yeah. What was that?
That was you hitting your microphone stand, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or
No, that was
somebody?
me hitting my
it was you.
microphone
All right.
stand.
I was going to say.
So that's the Dr. Bob's school. The next aspect, I was get my teeth in, is the archives, which is incredibly important because of your father's influence and legacy, and it really is a big collection that you've got there. I mean, I've sat in on one or two of your virtual tours that you've done over the last year, and I just wish I could just be in Asheville to come and have a look, but there's certain things that are stopping that happening at the moment. But look, according to your website, you've got instruments, you've got breadboard prototypes, you've got 5,000 photos, over 2,500 schematics, correspondence, memorabilia, recordings. Tell us a little bit about what's contained within the archive and what what is how can we see that and how that is used.
Well, it's you did a good job summarizing it. Of course, I know you're taking that from the website, but
Yeah.
we have incredible photos going back to 1947.
Wow.
And really amazing visual history of Bob's evolution, both as a person and as a inventor and business person. But there's also all the correspondence. We have decades of desktop notebooks where he would take notes on phone conversations that he was having, schematics, and his schematic notebooks throughout the years are also a very powerful source of information, as well as just some of his own writings and diaries. And yes, there are some prototype instruments or breadboard, just kind of breadboard prototypes, and other more evolved iterations of instruments as well. So it's really not only a vast but a very complex collection of the history of this incredible path that he forged. And we use the archives in a variety of ways, but the crowning glory of that is the Moogseum, that we've been able to share over 1,000 pieces of archival material through the touchscreen interfaces on the Bob Moog timeline, and we have a whole timeline of synthesis that's right across from me that features 34 developments over a 100-year period in synthesis. And we have a limited amount of space on the wall to convey this incredible trajectory from 1896 to 1995. But we were fortunate to have the help of Mal Meehan, who designed these incredible touchscreens for us, where we're able to share schematics, photographs, audio, video, history, just very, very deep information, as well as on the Bob Moog timeline. And on the Bob Moog timeline, we bring in, just a huge range of things, from letters that Bob wrote to his aunt over a 40-year period, his report cards, his acceptance into Cornell, his hand-drawing schematics. And it just kind of goes on and on and on. It's very, very deep. And, I will say that when people come through the Moogseum, it's a modest-sized space. And some people who want a very quick experience can walk through it in maybe, say, 15 or 20 minutes. We always look at them kind of curiously like, I wonder how much you actually got out of that. But we've had people come in here for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours, for 4 hours. People will sit down in front of the touchscreens and just delve in. So we're always thrilled when that happens, because we've worked so hard to bring this archival material to life for people. That archival material for us serves the same purpose as something like Dr. Bob's Sound School. This is all, created and brought to life to continue to inspire people. In the Moogseum, we have the opportunity to inspire people of all ages, and we do. So that I feel like is the most powerful way that we share this information, but we also share it with researchers of all kinds.
I was going to ask.
People who are writing books, people who are writing magazine articles, people who are doing documentaries, people who are doing, podcasts. People do come for us for source information, which is so very important, because a lot of people out there portend to understand the history of any given subject. But it's really when you go to the source that you get the accurate information.
I think we agree on that one. So the Moogseum is kind of like, is the shop front to the archive. Do you frequently change the exhibits? Obviously, things that are hardwired in or big and heavy probably don't, but do you change what goes on display? Is there a kind of revolving element to it, or have you picked out kind of a best of for the displays?
There's a little bit of both. Most of the exhibits will stay here, but within those exhibits, we will be updating them. Keep in mind that we just opened the Moogseum in May of 2019, and about 9 months later, we were closed for 5 months.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're just beginning to get back in the swing of being open under, kind of new dynamics and adjusting to that. But we are set in the next couple of months to do an update to our touchscreen timeline experiences, and we'll be bringing even more material to life. We did have the prototype sitting just to the right of me here. It was here for 18 months, which was such a joy. It was on loan from the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, where it was donated by Herb Deutsch in 1982. And they've been incredibly good to us. But so now we are trying to figure out what should go in its place. So we'll be bringing some new technology to life there, and we are hoping to create a new modular synthesis exhibit, which we do not have yet. That is one thing that had to be put on hold when we constructed the Moogseum, but we will be actively working on creating that exhibit in the later spring as well. So most of the exhibits are here to stay, but we will be expanding them within their own right. And I will say that we are hoping that in the next, say, 3 to 5 years, that the Moogseum may grow into a bigger space where we'll be able to offer a lot more information.
Sure. Do you take? Oh, sorry, a second. Do you take much of the exhibit out on the exhibits out on the road at all?
We have not done that. That is something that has been discussed. We have one really amazing display that is a half dome. That's an immersive exhibit that teaches people how electricity turns into sound when it travels through a circuit board. It's about 6 minutes long. Yeah. We may be licensing that exhibit out to other museums. There's been some interest there. Okay. We would like to create a traveling Moogseum exhibit. To do that takes upward of $250,000. So that's something that we would need to really focus some fundraising efforts on. And that is not the priority right now, traveling museum exhibits.
Sure. Yeah.
We've been focusing more on getting things to people virtually, but it is definitely something we want to do, to be able to share the Moogseum more with people. It's really interesting. I think I get it the most when I go to NAMM or I go to an outside convention or when I used to go to NAMM.
Yeah.
Back in the old days. And people would read our brochure and they would get all excited. It's like, where's the museum? Of course, people in LA think everything is in LA. And when we would say to explain to them it was on the other side of the country, they would really get quite disappointed. And that made me a little sad, but it also just, reinforced that, it would be really great to be able to bring our work into other physical locations. So we are working on that.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah. Count myself among those people disappointed. I have kind of a two-part question for you. Because of the curating that you're doing with everything to do with your father, but also his instruments, how is it that you're going about, or what needs do you have as far as collecting some of these historical pieces? I know elsewhere you have mentioned that there was one very particular instrument of value to you, the Theremin 201. I wonder if you might tell us that story, but also people who are watching the show and what are the needs of the Bob Moog Foundation as far as physical pieces of gear outside of donations?
Well, that is a great question. The fact is that Bob didn't leave behind a lot of hardware. He sold most of it. His goal was not to hold on to it. And as a result, we have some that we've built up over the years, but we do not by any means have everything that we would like to have. So there are people who have donated gear to us, which has been wonderful. And one thing that did happen when we were just about to open up the Moogseum is that it happened to be while I was at yoga. And I was just like, darn, is this what's happened when I, try to get away and go to yoga quickly? Because there's one yoga class I like to go to in the middle of the day, and it really just, helped me get through my work week. And I got this, text message. Someone came by and just dropped off a Sonic 6. I'm like, and it was someone who used to work at the factory, and they happened to be traveling through. They didn't use it anymore, so they dropped it off here. And we're really fortunate in that we have access to some really great techs. So even if we get things that haven't been, that aren't functioning perfectly, we can usually get them functioning well. So someone has, we've had people donate a Sonic 6, and we had someone donate a Micro Moog, and we've been able to acquire some instruments, and usually we kind of, there's a little bargaining going on, a little pleading. And people have been very kind to us. And there's a multi-Moog signed by Bob Moog that's being restored right now. And your question about the 201 is something that I've always coveted. The Model 201 theremin is one of the very first theremin models that Bob and his father ever built together as R.A. Moog Co. As far as we know, about only 20 were made. And I remember thinking they were like $10,000, which is way outside our budget. And maybe 2 years ago or so, shortly before we opened the Moogseum, actually someone from ThereminWorld.com contacted me, Jason, and said, Michelle, did you know one of your dad's Model 201s is up on eBay or up on Reverb? I can't remember where it was. And I got all excited and went there, and sure enough, I think it was like $10,000, $12,000, and I thought, oh, geez. And so I put a little watch on it. I thought, I'm just going to be interested to see what happens. And I think then it went from 10,000 to 9,000. I thought, surely someone's going to grab it, because not only was it really beautiful condition, but, and just to remind everybody there, this is a vacuum tube based theremin with this, gorgeous wood cabinet. But it had an original schematic from Bob. It had an instruction manual that was hand typed by my grandmother. Yeah.
That's special.
And I just, I pine for these kind of things.
Yeah.
And, some people want fancy cars. This is the kind of thing that I want. So after it went down to $9,000 and nobody grabbed it, I finally got up the guts and just messaged the guy and said, "Listen, this is who I am, and this is what we're trying to do." And I said, "But this is all I can pay," and it was much, much less than he was asking. And then he wrote me back and said, "I've always wanted this instrument to go to you guys, and I actually had offered it to you like 10 years prior." And as soon as he said that, I thought, "Oh my God, I know what he's talking about." Well, he had written me about 10 years ago when the foundation was much, much smaller than it is now. I think at that point it was still me working in my basement by myself. And he offered it to me then for $18,000. And even then, I went back to my emails and wrote him back and said, "I don't even think we could afford half that." No. So he said, "You know what? I agree with you. I will give it to you at the price that you can afford." And he said, "But I'm not going to ship it. You have to come pick it up," which of course. So what happened is he lived in LA. He wound up driving it to one of my board member, Daniel Keller's homes in Thousand Oaks. And because as soon as the transaction was done, he's like, I need to get this into your hands. And then it happened that Daniel was traveling to a convention by car in Las Vegas, and I flew to Las Vegas and picked it up. And it came in this kind of plastic case that was lined with styrofoam. And I can just remember I bought a seat for it. I mean, this is quite an endeavor, and it's like a labor of love. I can just remember carrying it through the Las Vegas airport. It's like the juxtaposition of picking this thing up in Las Vegas and carrying it through the Las Vegas airport with all of their slot machines and their glitzy lights, and then I thought, I don't know what this is going to be like getting this through security. It's like I had all these explanations. I was going to like open up the back if they wanted to see the back and be able to explain what all the parts were. It went through security with no problem.
That's amazing because that's the question, like, how do you get a theremin through TSA?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, they take everything out of my backpack, but when it's a theremin, I guess
And can we see the 201 at the Moogseum or?
Unfortunately, I have a stationary camera here, so
it's on display.
Yes, it is absolutely on display. We built a special case for it. It's one of the first things you see when you turn the bend into the Bob Moog timeline. Yeah, absolutely. And we're actually in the process of, speaking of kind of expanding exhibits, of bumping the cabinet out so it's deeper, putting a mirror in the back, and so we can take the back off the theremin so people can see into the back.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Right, simple. It takes it's just going to take a little bit. It's taking a little bit of time with everything that's been going on, but we absolutely love having it here.
Would that theremin have a sign on it in front there that says "Do not touch"?
It should do. It should do.
Where's my tumbleweed?
So it is. That one is behind glass. We also have a Melodia that's behind glass, and we have an Ethervox. Oh. And there's also a very funny story behind that, but that was a major bargaining type, situation because we couldn't afford that either, but we managed to finagle it. But then we do have an interactive theremin exhibit where people can get their hands on a theremin.
Do you often get donations or people coming up to you and saying, "Look, I've got this, I want to sell it, but I'd like to sell it"? Is that a frequent occurrence, or do you spend a lot of time looking for stuff? How is the acquisition process for the magazine?
Sometimes we look for stuff. Most of the time it's been people coming to us. And part of the reason that works is because if they come to us, they often either donate, which we're really grateful for, and I would ask that if anyone out there has Moog instruments that they would like to donate to the Bob Moog Foundation, would be deeply grateful. And I don't mean to make anyone roll with laughter, but especially vintage modulars. If you happen to have a Model 3C lying around,
Tucked
you'd
away in
really
the
love to have it. No, seriously, if anyone does have any modular components, we're always keeping our eye out for those, as well as any other instruments. But very often, like we recently acquired a Gil Trithal's a Mini Moog, but it's because he came to us with a very affordable offer.
Right.
We cannot compete with the collectors out there. We just don't have quite those means. But we also were able to acquire one of the last Voyager that was signed by Bob. Yeah, which is really, really meaningful. He actually signed it right after he found out that he was ill, and it's likely one of the last things he ever signed. And but someone came to us, and when they do that, they're not asking for any exorbitant sums. So we do acquire some things that way, and we are open to that. We feel like these technical and historical treasures are so important to steward and to share, that we do make every effort to try to acquire them when we can. So there is some funding for that, kind of depending on where we are with things.
Sure.
But of course, the donations are deeply appreciated as well, and not only instruments, but people have donated different kinds of Moog memorabilia to us, vintage catalogs, perhaps schematics that came with their instruments. Anything like that is a great help, not only to us but to our work, to be able to share it with other people.
Yeah, sure. Guys, have you got any other questions? Anything from the chat room you want to throw in?
I'll just have a look through the chat now. There was one that popped up before, and it followed on from my question asking Michelle about what she thought her dad's favourite device was. But then somebody asked in the chat, what was your favourite device? Like out of all of these wonderful creations, is there anything that you look back and think like that's the best one? I really like that. Or his game was in full flow there. You produced an absolute cracker. Is there anything that you really like above anything else?
Probably not in the way that you guys would judge things, which is, so it's not from like a highly technical perspective. But I think really the instruments that are the most meaningful to me are the earliest instruments. The prototype that we had here. I almost feel like I have this kind of weird spiritual connection to it.
Sure.
Because that was really, it was designed by my dad. And of course he had people advising him like Vladimir Yusachevsky and Gustav Siamago, who did help guide him to some of the parameters. Of course, Herb Deutsch being in the front of that line. But as far as his hands creating these incredible circuit boards, this incredible technology, I would say the Moog prototype and the very first theremins that he made. Just, he was so young. When I think about what I was doing at 19, and the fact that he had perfected his theremin designs to the point that they could be sold, that he dove into creating a business while he was in college, selling these instruments and the component parts that people would use to create them on their own. It's that connection. The fact is that with many other things that were created under the Moog name, he was collaborating with other people. As you guys know, the Mini Moog, of course, was born out of his early work with the modulars, but there were many other people involved. It's an absolutely incredible instrument, but for me, it doesn't have that I don't have quite the same connection to it that I do to instruments that I know that he designed on his own. So those are the ones that I'm connected to the most strongly.
It's almost like the later, like cousins or something, and the earlier work are closer family, aren't they? in that way. That's how I'd look at it anyway.
Yeah. I think it always is. I mean, I'm a collector of stuff, but the Fairlight obviously is my passion, and when I get bits come through here, it's the stuff that's had engineers write on it. That's I don't care whether it's just a common part or a rare part. It's that link to someone in a factory spending hours putting it together, or somebody designing that and then signing it off. And it's sometimes the documents that you find stuffed into the machines, there's gaps in the machines, and you find these documents handwritten, not necessarily schematics, but instructions or guides or things. And they're the precious things because it's a link to humanity, I guess. I think that's where that comes in.
Yeah, and I almost feel like, there's a time travel sense to it.
Yeah.
Like there was Dad's handwriting on the back of the prototype on some of the metal chassis that held the modules. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, you almost felt like if you could touch it, you could be there with him. You were almost there with him. So it's that kind of sense. And one of the things about those very early instruments too that has extra meaning to me is then they were the springboards for all these amazing instruments that came afterward, and that to me makes them even more powerful.
Sure. Yeah. Peter Churchyard in the chat room's just asked,
Peter,
was it a hobby that paid the bills mostly, or do you think it really was work in that kind of classic sense? Was it a hobby that paid bills, or was it like a 9 to 5?
Are you asking my dad or my mom?
Well, as we have you here, maybe you could answer for both.
It was work.
Yeah.
It was work, and it was work in the sense that, to be fair to my dad, it did bring in income. It brought it often, not always, often brought in enough income to support the family. Mm-hmm. Mostly when he was working for somebody else. Yeah. When he was working for himself, it was rare that he ever broke even, and sometimes these generous relatives who would help my parents out, their generosity would also be used to shore up the business when it was Big Briar or the iterations of RA Moog Co. But it was legitimate work, and it was a profession. It was something that was consistent, that he was devoted to, that he built upon, that he beckoned all kinds of advice from the users, and that he spent thousands of hours, considering, designing, redesigning. So, this is not, I'm gonna learn how to woodwork and hopefully build myself a dining room table one day. It was not that kind of pursuit. It was much more extensive than that.
Sure. Another question from... sorry, can I just put this one? Sorry. Jamie from GeoSynth was asking about what your father would feel about the foundation or the Moogseum today. I mean, I guess, how would your father feel about walking into the Moogseum and seeing his life's work laid out for...
Well, especially since, as you've described him, he was somewhat introverted as well, and to as Robbie said, walk in and see your big face there, how might he have reacted to that?
I think that he would be immensely uncomfortable, because he was very uncomfortable with the notion of celebrity. He was very uncomfortable when he was approached in a way that treated him like a celebrity. And I was actually with him once at a NAMM show when I was 21. It was one of my more powerful experiences with Bob Moog, actually, one of my very few before he passed away. And I can, if we have time, I can tell you what it was, but the discomfort that he showed when someone kind of went into adulation mode was so palpable. Yeah. So I do think initially that he would be uncomfortable, maybe even embarrassed. But I think that after he could see what the result of this Moogseum is, he would be deeply gratified to see how excited people are to come here, how much they connect with the material here. And let me say that the Moogseum is not just about Bob Moog, and we're very conscious of that. It starts with him, but very quickly there's a whole exhibit on Leon Theremin, how important Leon Theremin was, how important Clara Rockmore was, how important the inspirational chain from inventor to inventor is. There's a whole scientific thread that runs through this. We teach people how a theremin works and how to play it. And then there's basically an ode to the synthesizer industry, or history that came before Moog and after Moog. And people are inspired by all of it. And then we give people a chance to play a synthesizer, and people love it. They sit there for hours and explore. And I think it's the outcome, the output of the Moogseum that he would be very touched and gladdened by. I think that is, we see what we do at the Moogseum as following in the direct footsteps of what he himself was trying to do his whole life, which was to inspire people through sound. And we do that as well in a different way, in a slightly different way.
That inspiration was kind of happened indirectly as well, didn't it? Like, as other manufacturers were inspired by him, like the ripples spread, because without your dad's contribution to electronic music, I wouldn't be sat in this room now. It's an amazing shockwave that came from him sitting in his lab to affect some young lad on a council estate in Thatterweath, England. It's like it's amazing, and he did it, like all the things that we just use now and take for granted, like pitch wheels and the envelopes and everything, all came from your dad, and we're like really grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to ask, because I know that your father was a big fan of other people's inventions and technologies, and I've seen that firsthand with, and I'll say it again, the Fairlight. I've seen the video footage of him at the AES show where he's demonstrating, and his enthusiasm for this new thing from Australia that was capturing audio and then playing it back at different pitches was palpable. It was just really amazing to see, and I know that having spoken to Peter, he was just over the moon that your father would grace his invention with his kind of seal of approval. Was that something that he did frequently towards in the later years as more and more of this new technology came out? And what would he think, and this kind of follows on from a question in the chat room, what would he think about the way that it's not a fair question, is it? What do you think he might think about the way that modern synthesizers and synthesis has gone in terms of software, moving into that whole software environment? Was he passionate, or did he understand where that was going? Did he have any thoughts on that?
Well, let's just first start by saying that I never really talked to Bob Moog about these things, because I never really talked to Bob Moog.
Sure.
I talked to my dad.
Yeah.
So I don't know firsthand what he thought. I can tell you, though, that one time that I did walk around NAMM, what really struck me, and this has been reiterated by other instrument designers, is I saw this kind of insatiable, almost childlike curiosity about what other people were doing.
Right.
And that's something that ran through his entire life, whether it was with his work or in nature or in cooking, is he was so curious about what things were and how they worked and what they could do. And I think that he greatly admired many other people's work and knew that there were people who were taking things in a direction that he was not. And he really admired that. I would say he was a great admirer of all of his contemporaries, of Don Buchla, Dave Smith, Tom Oberheim, Peter Zinoviev. Peter, when I interviewed Peter for Electronic Voyager, he said, "Yeah, your dad sat on the floor, exploring the VCS-3. He said, with such curiosity, it was like a real joy to see that. And it really helps when someone is as egoless as my father was, in that there was no ego in him exploring someone else who had taken things in another direction, a better direction, than he had.
Yeah.
So. As far as the question of what he might think of the way synthesis has gone at this point, I think he saw the boom of software synthesis coming. He is credited with saying that the computer was the most important invention for music since catgut. So even though he did not delve as deeply into software as many other people, is actually in 2004 he and John Eaton talked about going to the NEAM conference.
Oh yes.
To find a software developer that could help them with a multi-touch sensitive keyboard, because neither of them knew anything about software. Dad was definitely not a coder.
Sure.
I think that he would just be blown away at the capability that's out there. And I tell you, I was so new to all of this when I started. And the first time that I really wondered, or not wondered, I knew that he would have been blown away, was when I was introduced to Eric Persing at NAMM.
Oh yes.
And went over and heard Jordan Rudess exploring Omnisphere. And it just sounded so great. And I just thought, God, Dad would just be, he would be blown away by the capacity and capability of these new software instruments.
Yeah.
That said, I know he was also very big on human nuance in synthesis, and it's something that he was really devoted to his entire career. A lot of times it was in the background. You can see a little bit of it on the Voyager with the touchpad. And even the mod wheels, that is a little bit more human nuance than you get out of a keyboard. And I, initially I think he would feel like it's hard to get that human nuance out of a computer synthesizer. But that too has changed with the advent of the Hawken Continuum and the Rolly and any other of these incredible touch-sensitive both controllers and instruments that have come out, in the past 10 years?
Yeah.
It's just amazing. Just amazing. I mean, I think he would just be thrilled to see where the realm of synthesis has taken people.
Does your father, did he ever regret not patenting everything that he did?
That is, again, a discussion that we never had. He never talked about it. So I can't say for sure.
Sure. No, of course.
And, but, I've thought about that because people have conjectured that if you had patented this thing or that thing, that, we could have Moogseums in every major city of North America. Because the Bob Moog Foundation really started off with nothing. There was a grassroots organization, and we have worked our way up with the support of, hundreds of thousands of supporters over the past 15 years. But I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. No.
So I don't know. But
No.
I do know is that I think that he inherently accepted about himself that his work was to expand the realm of synthesis, and it's really where he was focused, and everything else was secondary. So, and you know, when regret, I think, can only be constructive to a certain point before it drags you down, and I don't think he allowed that to happen because he wanted his energies and his focus to be on expanding the realms of synthesis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just going through some questions that have been posted by our members over the last sort of week or so. Just trying to pick out one or two here.
Robbie,
yeah,
should we take a brief break and do the winners announcement?
Oh, yes.
And then kind of come back to more questions after that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just... for those that were with us last week, we spoke about a new plugin that had been developed by Pulsar Modular, and it's a software recreation of the 914 fixed filter bank, and we talked about that, and it's available from them now for $299. The guys at Pulsar Modular have very kindly donated 3 copies of this to give away, and we decided that what we would do is we'd encourage people to share this show around the internet, and tagging using hashtags as kids do these days, so that we could monitor that. And we do have three winners that we have selected at random. I wish we had the technology to kind of do something official and fancy with this, but we just basically listed the names and picked 3 at random, blindfolded, like a pin the tail on the donkey kind of thing. With no fanfare whatsoever, I'm happy to announce that 3 individuals, and I hope I pronounced this right, let me just... So it's Greg Marcassini. I hope that I have said that correct.
Great.
Sasquatch. I know that's not his real name, unless it really is Bigfoot. But it's the user Sasquatch who generally inhabits our chat room as well as many other chat rooms online, and JD Crouch. So those 3 people have all won a copy of Pulsar Modular's 914 fixed filter bank. We will be sending codes to you to redeem those in the next 24 hours or so. So thank you to those 3, and also to everyone else, including yourself, Michelle, and Molly, who's been absolutely fantastic. Love chatting with Molly.
She's great.
Putting out stuff around the internet, and we hope that it spread the word a little bit further. And of course, it's not just about everyone that's watching live right now. It's this now sits on the internet in perpetuity, and so people can come back and hopefully gain some information and entertainment.
And a big thanks to Ziad from Pulsar Modular, who donated these, who's obviously a Moog fan. And it was wonderful that we could do this to do it this week to get some more attention for the Bob Moog Foundation. And so just, everybody, I hope you enjoy your plugins. The 3 of us have been using them. We've all recorded songs the last week that feature these, and we'll talk about it more next week. And if you want to hear some of it in action already, I already put up a video with mine. We'll get to those a little more next week, but congratulations to the winners.
Yes, absolutely. And there is the Pulsar Modular P914 FFB, the fixed filter bank, which is I think is safe to say it's one of the more kind of misunderstood modules from I forget which system it came from. Was it somebody help me out here? Where was that? No, anyone? No, just going to leave me floundering.
I don't know either.
You see, okay. Well, anyway, look, it's an interesting thing because a lot of people think that it's just a kind of graphic EQ or an equalizer of some sort, and it's not. It's much more than that. It's a very clever thing that Bob did, and there's a lot of love for Bob in this as well, particularly from the guys behind this, and Ziad is the guy there that does this.
It should be said also that Wendy Carlos had a lot to do with that.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yes.
What?
As far as giving, asking for that kind of module, that kind of capability.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
one
I
great thing
think
about
that-
this is that you can save presets, and there's a kind of a random feature which models the behavior of the system, of the unit, in different kind of temperature configurations. If the room was warm or cold, it would behave slightly differently, and so that kind of random feature does that. And then when you hit on something you like, you can save that, which of course you couldn't do with the old hardware itself.
Something that I did with it, because I recall hearing about Wendy Carlos. See, Robbie, you almost make me want to say Wendy Carlos all the time, but Wendy Carlos.
Well,
Carlos.
You Brits. But
Listen, we're willing to put up with the way that you insist on saying Moog.
yeah.
We're having, we're having
Who's-
Carlos.
who's saying Moog?
No, too many people.
It's a British thing. We've said Moog for a long time, but with the advent of the internet, we found out how it was really supposed to be
I have to
pronounced.
hold my hands up and say that for many years it was just Moog for me.
It's Moog. Mini
until
Moog.
I was educated,
Yeah.
and now I get it right 99% of the time.
So
Good job, Rob.
listening to how Wendy Carlos was wanting to experiment with acoustic textures, and because of the resonances that this module would produce because of the inductors, I thought I would do a little experiment on it. And so on my track, one of the tracks within the song, I should say, was acoustic guitar. And I don't pull out the acoustic a lot, but I thought, let me give this a shot. And so I used it on the acoustic guitars, and I used the left-right function that this plugin has. And so it alternates the frequencies, each of the frequencies in line, to go left to right. And then I EQ'd basically, I'm using that roughly, like I sculpted the sound of the acoustic guitar with the resonance of the fixed filter bank, and it came out sounding really cool. And of course, lathered everything else with Lunar Lander module.
Yes, indeed. That's a really,
Lunar Lander's just the best effect I've used on a computer.
It's one of the
for
most
it.
fun, isn't it? Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Brilliant.
So I want to go on to one more subject, one more kind of main subject. But before I do, I have a special question submitted to us a few days ago from, I think somebody, Michelle, you and I both know very well, Mr. Edwin Lampthwaite, who has asked, he wanted me to ask you, what is special about your bookshelves in regard to the Moog legacy? I literally have no idea what he's talking about. And if you don't want to answer that because I have no idea what it's about, please say.
No, I can answer that.
Okay.
And thank you, Edwin, for asking a non-contentious question. That was very gracious of you. I have 2 bookcases in my home that are made of walnut. Mm-hmm. They're the same walnut that the cases of the the early Moog modulars were made from.
That's amazing.
And I will say that there was a time when a certain Mark Doty worked for the Bob Moog Foundation, and we loved having him over for dinner. And when I first told him, about the bookcases, I do believe that there was some, kind of intimate physical contact that he then had with those.
Knowing Mark,
bookcases.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. I'm dreading what that was now.
Yeah, I shall now know not to have Mark over to mine for dinner.
No, it was quite amusing, and it was just kind of an expression of how deeply connected he feels to all of that early history.
That's brilliant.
So thank you, Edwin. Those bookcases are very
awesome.
cool and treasured part of our home.
I bet. Thank you for answering that one. So I want to move on. We've got just under half an hour left. The last thing I want to, the main thing I want to speak to you about is Electronic Voyager, which is this documentary movie that sees you go on a journey. And you mentioned about this before, about learning about your father, because you didn't really understand until very late on, what it was that he had such a great impact on. And so this film, which I backed, and it's some years ago now. It's a long protracted process, but completely understandable that, because Wave Shaper Media, a very small company, and I guess, making a film like this, as I've spoken to people like Dave Spears about Bright Sparks, it's a long thing and it takes a lot of money. Can you just give us an idea of, a synopsis of what the film is about, how you go through this journey, meeting all of these people that Bob's work touched in so many ways?
Well, it is really what's the tagline? Following Bob Moog's sonic footsteps.
Yeah.
And we really did just that. I mean, Wave Shaper, which is comprised of two gentlemen named Jason and Rob, were really dedicated to being able to talk to as many people as was financially and physically possible. And exploring the experience of Bob Moog and the history through other people's eyes, the people who were there. And we were able to go as far back as my eldest sister, Laura. And she talks about her memories, but also then my father's cousin, Ray Herman, who is 80 years old, who is the only person alive who spent time with my dad in that basement workshop.
Right.
As he was building theremins, and he would have talks with Ray about his connection to the electrons. So we talked to Ray about what it was like, what Bob was like, as a person, as a young inventor, as just a regular teenager at that time. But then we spoke to my mother, and fortunately that we did that because she's passed away since then, and to Herb Deutsch, to the early engineers at R.A. Moog Co. and some other people who were involved in the earliest iteration of the company, including David Borden. Right on through to Gary Newman and Bernie Worrell and Rick Wakeman, but including Peter Zinoviev, people like Lydia Kavina, Jean-Michel Jarre. So it's really a breadth of people, because you know how they say that you're different people know different parts of you. You're different with different people. And to really try to understand Bob Moog and this history, we needed that complexity, that spectrum of people who knew him. And it's really just been the most glorious experience. And I told Rob and Jason I really missed traveling with them, because every interview was just, new insights, new connection. It was just mind-blowing. I felt like I needed to sit in a corner and meditate after every conversation, because it's just you get information. They're showing Jean-Michel Jarre right now. Oh my God, and that was amazing. I stood 2 feet from Rick Wakeman in this freezing cold storage unit while he was playing the Mini Moog. It blew me away.
I need to have words with you about that as well, but we'll come to that in a moment.
Okay, and he also, and there's Ed Kelhoff was amazing. Yeah. Super articulate guy. There's my mom. Really, and talking to Larry. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's just stunning.
I can't wait to see it.
Me either. And there's Jim Scott, who was hired by Dad in 1969, tells an absolutely hilarious story of how he's hired. We had several conversations with Herb Deutsch, who was just amazing. But I'll just tell you, just for example, there I am in the purple dress, and there's my Laura. I mean, there's my sister Laura. I mean, just wow. I get goosebumps when I'm looking at this footage, because it is such a rich story, in that there are so many people involved. I mean, really do see Bob Moog's life and legacy as kind of an umbrella at which he is at the top of, but there's all these other facets to it, all these other people involved. I was talked to David Borden. Dad and David Borden used to go sit at that lake and talk when Dad, especially, and there I'm at his grave right there. So it's just really been a stunning experience, and I can't wait to be able to share it with everybody. That is the house that I grew up in, that my parents bought in 1967. And of course, seeing Keith's modular, I almost lost my gourd, just amazing. Then this is the area where I grew up when I was a little kid. But just to take two little instances. One was with Jean-Michel Jarre, and what a really smart, articulate, deep guy. I so loved meeting him. And at one point during the interview, he said to me in his beautiful French accented English, he said, Michelle, for me, Bob was like my father. Wow. Not my actual father, but Bob was my musical father. Yeah. And it just blew me away.
Yeah.
It blew me away when everything you know about Jean-Michel Jarre. For someone like that to say, Bob Moog is my musical father. I mean, the inspiration, the impact of that then ripples out to everyone who enjoys Jean-Michel's music is overwhelming and incredibly beautiful and cosmic almost to think about.
Yeah.
And then Rick Wakeman is the one who got me. I'm gonna start tearing up now too. He was reflecting on Dad and at one point during the interview, and he said, I'm not even going to try and do his English accent. I really wish I could. If I could perfect an English accent, I would talk like that all the time. He said,
that's how you do it. Carlos.
He said, there's some people that you could just, their presence in your life, even though they're gone, is so strong that you could easily envision them walking through the door right now. And he said, and I can do that with Bob. I can just feel Bob could walk through that door right now. Yeah. At which point I, was choking back tears on camera. But, of course, people also talk about the instruments. Gary Newman was really articulate too. I mean, he was one of the first people we interviewed, and I turned to Jason and Rob and said, I think we can just pack it up and go home now. Just 90 minutes of Gary Newman, I think, will be good. He was amazing and so honest and humble and and we also actually the first person we interviewed was Dave Van Koevering, who has since passed away as well. So even though I know some people have a little bit of consternation about how long this is taking, the beauty of this is Rob and Jason had the foresight, the commitment, and the dedication to start when they did, because we have lost a lot of people that we interviewed, and we now have that with Bernie Worrell. We were able to interview him a month before he passed away. So I am grateful, deeply grateful to Rob and Jason for that, and I know it's there. I've seen the 2-hour rough cut, and there's a 4-hour rough cut, and they are working on it, and it's absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait till they get it to a place where we can share it with people. And I know Jason has jumped on and said we are working on it. But as these things go, finances is a holdup, and they are working their way through that. So it is in their hands at this point, and I'm doing everything that I can to assist.
And I'd say it was an instant backer for me when it first came, and I think I've subsequently bought the white vinyl that's in the collection downstairs. But I want to take you to task over I think you may or may not know. So I hope we don't get our wrists slapped for copyright on this, but we'll say that you said we could. This is the clip that's on the Wave Shaper YouTube channel, where it's a segment of the Rick Wakeman interview. Now, I am a huge Rick Wakeman fan, but also Rick lives about 20 miles that way, and frequently see him, particularly, and this is my local area. This is all, I was born in Norfolk, and we know where Rick's place is. And I think I've worked out where this place is because I think he keeps this quite secret. But
Yes,
this
he
was
does.
just fascinating.
Hello.
Hello.
Rick is
How
just.
are you, darling? Good to see
I
you.
wish I could
How are
spend
you?
time with this
Cold.
guy. Maybe,
I know,
hopefully
Welcome
one day
to
I will.
Norfolk.
But
Welcome
this
to my store.
lockup that he's got
Thank
here
you.
in the middle of the Norfolk countryside is fascinating.
in.
But I think when you said you were coming to do this, I think I sent you a message saying, "Hey, stop by for a cup of tea." But you were just like so, in and out, in and out.
Oh, I've got a cup of tea
There's
somewhere.
even a
We
guest
don't
in our
normally
chat
come
room,
up here in
Peter
the winter,
Churchyard, who
but,
says he was born in Norwich.
I can see
So was
why.
I. We're Norwich
See the
boys
mess
through
in
and
there?
through.
Yes.
How great to
Quite
see.
impressive.
A lot of this
I don't know if
collection
I'd
that you
call
see
it
in
an
this video is
expert.
actually up for sale.
Well, it's
at
up
the
there. We
moment.
know
He's
where most
selling a
things
lot of
are.
this off.
I
But
see we have
you
part
know,
of your assortment of mini
how many
Well, I've
mini
got
modes does
9.
one man need? 9,
All told.
apparently. I
This
think
was-
is the answer.
9. Yep.
One of the minis on the
But he only
last
has like 4 on
stroke
display.
ARW
So
tour.
it's
I'll
just
show you a
amazing.
little secret.
But
The
yeah,
great
this was.
thing
I think
about
this,
the
I cannot
minis,
wait
you
to
see
see
you've
this
got
entire
that little
segment in the
space down
movie.
the
That's
bottom
going to
there.
be a
That's
big
my
one
cheat
for
sheet.
me.
This little-
Brilliant. He's brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. He and what a raconteur.
Yeah, yes, and hilarious, as everybody knows. The things that come out of his mouth, it's like, wow, that's amazing that you just actually said that.
Yes, I think if you need an example of how much Rick is a raconteur, there are 2 examples. There's a clip of him and your father and Bernie Worrell, and I believe somebody else is there, and he's telling, Rick tells this story, and I won't say it's a surprise, but also his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame acceptance speech is a stone cold classic piece of Rick Wakeman and his amazing kind of wit and comedy. He's not just good on the keys. I'd love to spend a few hours with a few bottles of wine, maybe. I don't know if he still drinks. I'm not entirely sure. He, if you follow him on Twitter, he often regales you with his dietary habits and the consequences thereof.
Right.
But yeah, it's good fun. Do you have any idea roughly when we might get to see this film? Whether it's in theatres or whether on disc or no?
I don't. I think Jason's been pretty open with the fact that they need they need funding. So they don't have the funding, so it depends when the funding comes. And that is an unknown at this point. So you're working with an unknown variable. So it's
Sure.
impossible for me to say. I mean, they would love to finish it up as soon as possible. But I do know that COVID has made things harder over the past year, but it's a pursuit that they are focused on, and they will not give up until they find the right fit, and they will.
Good. Well, I've not uttered a word of complaint because I know, having seen what's there, it's obvious it's a good film.
It looks brilliant, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
looks
does.
essential
And I think
viewing.
I'm going to have a box of tissues here, because I think I was welling up when I saw you well up in certain things, because it must be. My father passed a few years ago, but he was a humble restaurateur who only affected a very small group of people. But when I heard stories at his wake about how and again, this was a side of my father I never saw, because this was when he was working in the restaurant, and I was, as either a young child, I was asleep upstairs, or I'd left home by that time. And to hear the connection he had with other people and how he made them happy just by serving them great food was just like, and then he would tell stories. He's like me, he talks a lot, and just to hear that was really emotional. So when you see somebody else, particularly someone whose father has an impact on our lives collectively as synth nerds, I think I'm going to get quite emotional at that one too.
Yeah, and one particularly poignant scene, this is where I could not hold back the tears. We went to the Bronx High School of Science, where he studied, and
Right.
he was so happy to be accepted there because he did not fit in with what he calls the rest of the jocks in his elementary school. And so at 14 years old, he was admitted to the Bronx High School of Science, where he felt he fit in a lot better with a bunch of nerdy kids. But they were nice enough to open up the school for us. We went and saw the physics lab where he studied, and they got out all of his records for us. Cool. And I was like leafing through his personal statements, and yeah, it was very powerful.
I bet.
Yeah,
I bet. And so I can relate to that, because I've since seen things that my dad wrote, or pictures I'd never seen before in my entire life, and they just come out of the bottom of the box because we're clearing his things out, and it's just like, wow. Indeed. Anyway, guys, have you got anything else that you'd like to ask Michelle? Because we've got about 10 or 11 minutes left, and I don't want to rush things through. So, anything?
Why don't we tease the next show and then kind of do a wrap-up after that?
Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely. Oh, you'll like this one, Michelle, I think. We've got a really special. Not say you're not in any way special, but this one we landed literally within the last 24 hours. Look at him with his Moog cushion there. Look. So next week we are going to be joined by the one and the only Geert van Schlanger.
How's it slanging?
Schlanger, yeah, how's it slanging? Now, you might know that Geert has appeared on a number of videos from a friend of the show, Alex Ball, but we've got Geert as our very special guest next week, so we're going to be asking him about how he writes music for the adult film industry and everything else that he's related with. But yeah, that's we're super excited about getting Geert on.
Very talented man.
Hugely talented, I've been told. Yeah. I've seen some of the films. So Geert van Schlanger, I hope I've pronounced that correct, but I'm sure he'll tell me otherwise when he comes on the show next week. I love the Dutch accent. It's only like 50 miles across the water that way, and I love the Dutch accent, so I'm going to have to really rein myself in, because when I speak to people, if they've got a great accent, I just find myself subconsciously mimicking, and that's awfully rude.
I'm not heard you do that with me.
Yeah, well, sometimes I do. Sometimes I slip into a bit of Northern. So yeah, we got Geert van Schlanger joining us next week on the show. So and we're not going to tell you who else we've got, but we have been working very hard behind the scenes. Michelle is kind of like our flagship guest. And we've now got a whole bunch of other people that I wonder sometimes if that's been an influence, whether we said, hey, yeah, Michelle's, she said she's going to come on the show.
It definitely, it definitely helps. Yeah,
it definitely helps. But I so want to tell you some of these names because they are really, really exciting. But yeah, please, stay tuned, and of course, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, everyone. If you don't already, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell, because then if you do that, every time we set up a show, you'll get a notification when the show's going to be scheduled and when it starts, and you won't miss a thing. So please do that. And of course, if you're on Facebook, you can watch the show on our Facebook page, and we're now broadcasting on Twitter underneath our own Twitter handle @ProSynth Network. So loads of ways that you can watch and get involved. But yeah, just a reminder for next week, the one and only Geert van Schlanger will be joining us, and I'm super excited about that one.
We asked for questions in the group for Michelle, but maybe we shouldn't ask for any questions for Geert.
Yeah, that could get sticky. Yeah. And I don't... Maybe. Anyway, I just want to say, Brian Oliva in the chat room, who goes under the handle of Getsemani Music, has just left us an incredibly lovely compliment, and I do like to blow our own trumpet, and that's not a Geert quote. Agreed, this has been your best show to date. Now we expect this level of commitment every week. Thank you, Brian, and that's really, that it means a lot to us. We try our best. We don't always hit the mark, but we do try. Anything else? I'm thinking, like, let's talk for just a moment. There's something that I would like to wrap up the show with, if you guys don't mind. Of course not.
Yeah.
But until then, let's talk about how we can support the work that Michelle is doing now. I'll lead off by just one thing, because I've heard about. I heard about Amazon Smile from the Bob Moog Foundation, and you'll be able to explain this better than me, but the process of getting signed up for this, let me just tell you about it. I'm already logged into Amazon. I go to Google and I type in Amazon Smile. It takes me there. It says, what do you want to support? I put Moog, and it pops up with the Bob Moog Foundation.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And about 30 seconds, I'm done. It's so easy. But Michelle, could you tell us about Smile, and then also all the other ways that we can help you out?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, Amazon Smile is a program that Amazon has to support nonprofits. And as Cryss was explaining, you just go on and choose the Bob Moog Foundation as your charity of choice, you just go onto Amazon Smile, and that's the first thing it asks you. Who do you want to support? You can do it the same way he did. And then what happens is when you go to use Amazon, you go to Amazon Smile, not regular Amazon, but Amazon Smile, and you place your order through Amazon Smile. It's the exact same interface. But then what happens is a small percentage of your order goes to the Bob Moog Foundation. And it's that easy. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's a real numbers game for us. So the more people we have participating, the more funding comes to the foundation. They send it every 3 months. So I would encourage all of you. It's just such an easy, you don't even have, you think about it once, you don't have to think about it again. The Bob Moog Foundation is just there as the beneficiary organization that you want to support, and you can just spend away as we all do on Amazon.
I took my bookmark that's on my browser, because I do it on my computer, and so I deleted that off, and then once I had signed up for the Smile, I put that as my Amazon bookmark. So if you guys, because you don't want to forget and just go to Amazon and do it, you want to be doing it under that Smile, so that they'll be getting a percentage of that.
I do it here in the UK. Unfortunately, we don't get to choose the foundation, because I guess it's a regional thing. But I use it to donate to cancer research here in the UK, and because I'm an Amazon Prime member, I'm always buying stuff through Amazon. It just made sense. And it is, as you say, it's so simple, and you can do it on the web browser. You didn't used to be able to do it on your mobile devices, but you can now. So if you get the Amazon app, you can set it to smile.amazon.com or .co.uk, depending where you are. And it's so simple. You just buy stuff, and that's it. They'll make the donation, and then they'll also keep you informed as well about how much you've contributed yourself, which sometimes make you feel bad, because you think, God, how much have I spent on Amazon? But then it also tells you, as a collective, how many, how much has been raised for the organisation, which is great.
Can we talk about a few other ways that people can support the foundation?
Of course, absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. So, of course, donations are an obvious option, and a very powerful option. I like to tell people, funding for the foundation is like gas in a car.
Sure.
And so it is really important. And if at any point you can donate to the Bob Moog Foundation, we put that funding to very good use, inspiring people through Bob Moog's legacy. So also the donation of any kind of gear or archival material is a very powerful way to support us. And I know that there are many people out there in the chat who have supported us in those ways, so thank you all very much for that support. The other way is the online store that Rob shared the link to. You can just put Google Bob Moog Foundation online store, and it'll bring you to our store. We've got all kinds of cool stuff there, and all of the sales go to benefit our projects. And also, we've been really fortunate throughout our 15 years in existence, almost, to have 3 very powerful companies support our work by creating benefit sample banks for us. The first one is our hero, Spectrasonics, creating the Bob Moog Tribute Library that works with Omnisphere. So for all you Omnisphere users out there, if you don't have the Bob Moog Tribute Library, it's an absolutely wonderful way to support the foundation. There are over 800 songs on it. Over 40 different musicians participated in it. And every single cent of it goes to the Bob Moog Foundation. I will say that funding has been a sustaining source of income for us. We're deeply grateful to Spectrasonics. Motu also has the Encore Sound Bank that works with their Mach 3 sampler, I believe. That it also they donate 90% of the proceeds to the Bob Moog Foundation. And most recently, Native Instruments came out with modular icons, and for that, they sampled different modulars of all different varieties, not just Moogs, including Tonto, which is up in Calgary, And that project also benefits us. So please, if you are into using software libraries, these are 3 really powerful choices, and they're incredibly helpful to furthering our work.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that, and so it's really interesting.
Oh yeah, please have a look,
Yeah.
because that's a really incredible library. We sampled Steve Piccaro's Polyfusion modular. There's a Tonto, ARP 2600, ARP 2500, the Synth 100. Of course, my memory is going to fail me now, but
I'm sold off that. That's enough.
It's also worth mentioning the Motu library works with the Mac 3, but also works with UVI Falcon, which is kind of like the next thing. So yeah, if you've got UVI Falcon, or I believe UVI Workstation, it'll work on there as well. So that kind of expands its reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any of those ways, and also there's also a whole blog on cool ways to support the Bob Moog Foundation. We have a Bandcamp page.
Cool.
So there are all kinds of ways if people want to explore that. But the most powerful are the ones that I've talked about here.
Excellent.
And people can also sign up for our e-newsletter. Just keep in touch with what we're doing. Oh, and I should say that our raffles are always also a super powerful way to support us. Twice a year we give away a vintage Moog instrument. It's usually either a vintage mini Moog or a vintage memory Moog, and sometimes it's a variety of other instruments, as it was for the last trifecta. But I will say that we have a really cool announcement coming up very soon about that.
Right.
But those are, just know that every time you buy a raffle ticket, whether you win or not, I will tell you that I get notification of every single sale. It comes up on my phone. And at this point, I look at those and I just say thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Every time they come up. They've been so important to us. So please know that participation, for those of you who participate, is really, really powerful.
Good.
And
Excellent.
thank you.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah, please, if it's just a small donation, a lot of small donation makes a big difference.
Yes,
so.
and people can also sign up to make monthly donations. If we have people who donate $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month, it's really whatever you can afford. But those sustaining donations are really important because we know we can count on them coming in every month.
Yeah.
So, and also, if you are in or around Asheville, please consider coming to the Moogseum. We would love to see you and welcome you.
I was going to ask, what the what's the kind of the logistics at the moment? Obviously, we live in a pandemic world, so you've got to follow a set of guidelines. What is the logistics situation at the moment with visiting?
We are open. We have been open since September 5th. We do have a limited capacity. We're only allowing 8 to 10 visitors in the gallery at a time. That's so everyone has plenty of room to spread out. We do request that people stay 6 feet apart. Of course, everyone has to sanitize their hands the minute they step in the building, and everyone has to mask. In my case, I double mask. So that's been very, relatively easy to maintain all of that, which has been wonderful. I think the most important thing is that we're limiting our capacity.
Yeah.
And I wish you guys could see these, but they're these big, we made these big stickers for the floor that are shaped like a Moog knob.
Oh, wow.
And it's they're turned to 6, and it says, please stay 6 feet apart.
Super. So that way to work that limitation. How good.
Right? Absolutely. Gotta bring the Moog fun into it when you can.
Fantastic.
Also, I did just want to point out that if people want to, I did a TED Talk several years ago.
You did?
Yes, it's great.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
enjoyed that.
it's a little bit more of this kind of trajectory that led to the creation of the foundation, but like what it's about the power of inspiration, really, which the foundation is the result of, as well as so much that is involved in the Moog legacy.
Yeah, so it's inspired the journey of discovering my famous father, Michelle Moog Koussa from TEDx Asheville. You just go to TEDx Talks, and you'll be able to find it there. I think we all watched this as part of our research for today.
It's very
I
good.
think I've seen this before as well. So lots of great information contained therein. Michelle, I can't begin to say how grateful we are that you joined us today. It's an utter complete honour to have you with us today and to tell us your story and to tell us about the BMF and the Moogseum and of course Electronic Voyager, which we hope to see very soon. What have you got planned? Anything you can give us a sneak peek of? You've mentioned some stuff coming. Anything that any time that we should be listening maybe for some exciting news?
Well, we're really focused on trying to scale Dr. Bob's Sound School, so that custom educational tool hopefully will be announced sometime this year. So keep your ear out for that. We're going to be constructing that new exhibit in the Moogseum. We'll be sharing that. We'll be expanding our work in virtual education, so people can look out for that. And we'll be doing more virtual tours of the Moogseum. That's something that we've done quite a bit of since the pandemic.
I love those.
And, some of them are just me doing a complete tour, but we've also done focus tours and brought in people from different parts of the Moog legacy, including Herb Deutsch. We explored the Abominatron tapes the last time.
Yes.
I was able to talk to Dale Ong and Felix Visser, who both worked with Bob during the Big Briar years in different capacity, be able to experience the Moogseum and support us at the same time. So we do one of those like once every 2 or 3 months. So keep your eye out for those.
Yeah.
And we are always working to bring new, exciting, inspiring content to more and more people. So awesome. Just sign up for our newsletter. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also follow me. I have on Moogstress. I'm also on those 3 handles. I have a family archive that I share there that people can kind of partake in if that interests them. But they just keep in touch with us because we are pushing forward in every way that we possibly can.
Awesome. Well, the very best of luck in all of your future endeavours, and I hope that we can all at some point come and visit you at the Moogseum. And
we will roll out the red carpet for you.
Thank you very much. It's an honour. Chris, Ben, I just want to hand it over to you. Have you got any final words that you'd like to give to Michelle?
I'd just like to say what an honour it's been, to have the insight and to hear all about the great things that's going on in your dad's legacy. It's just amazing. I think it's a tremendous honour to him, and a tribute to him. That you're doing this great work in his memory. It's brilliant, and I really appreciate you being on our humble little show. Great.
Chris?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing. And actually, I just wanted to leave you with 3 of the comments from the live stream chat because I thought you would like these. And Adam Machine says, if there are harps in heaven, Bob will have an oscillator or 2 on a few by now. And Jim Glue says, Michelle has inherited her dad's lovely demeanor. And this one I thought was really significant. Martin Taylor says, Bob sacrificed his music, and I think this was in light of the conversation we're having about him giving up piano or, to that career in order to pursue electronics. He said he sacrificed his music for all other musicians to create. So we thank you. We really appreciate you being on the show and being able to talk to you, get to know you a little better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it is my honor, really, to be here. I am so humbled to be representing this legacy, and I always tell people I just feel like I am walking this golden path that Bob Moog worked so hard to forge, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime privilege of mine that I cherish every day.
You're doing an amazing job, and I could not think of anybody more appropriate to do it. So,
Yeah.
more power to you. Keep
Thank
on
you.
keeping on.
Well,
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you all for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. Our pleasure completely. Thank you ever so much, Michelle. Thanks to everybody in the chat room as well. I mean, guys and girls, you have been flooding it with comments and good humour and messages, and I'd love to go through them all, but then we'd have to do a whole other show just to get those in. So let me just collectively put you all together and say thank you ever so much for your contribution. You guys and girls make the show, because otherwise it would just be three boring old farts talking to people, and it just wouldn't be much fun. So thank you, and please do remember to like and subscribe. You know, it doesn't cost you anything. Do like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you get reminders. If you want to donate to us, of course, we have our link, and we'll have all of Michelle's links. If they're not already in the description underneath this video, they will be in the next 24 to 48 hours. They'll all appear in there, so you can just go click and straight through. We'll do all the links to the Foundation, the Moogseum, to the Electronic Voyager, to Smile, Amazon. We'll do all of that and put all of that in there. And if you want to keep in touch with us, we are now fully consolidated across all social media platforms. Cryss did an amazing job a couple of days ago to make sure that he mopped up the mess that Ben had left. And I mean that in the nicest way. So we are now ProSynth Network across the board.
Listen,
Twitter.
I had one called Wellington Boots, little puppies, and phones for freedom. They were perfect names.
Absolutely. So Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, we are across all of those, and of course YouTube, because that's how you're hopefully watching us if you're not watching on the other platforms there. So you can find us across there. We will be back next week. Our very special guest, as I said before, is Geert van Schlanger. We are really looking forward to having him on the show, and I'm sure he's really looking forward to having us. So on that note, I am going to stop, because I will turn into something I probably shouldn't be exposing publicly. Guys, girls, everyone, Michelle, Cryss, Ben, thank you ever so much. It's been an absolutely fantastic show. Join us again next week, and bye-bye.
Bye.